Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Coach Cody podcast. I don't know about you, but I have been pretty distracted by the news and current events going on in the world with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. So that's been that's been wild. It's crazy, all of the emotions going on in the world. I feel like we're a nation of unregulated emotions, and yeah, just. When you think there couldn't be a bigger divide between Americans, something like this happens. And I'll admit, my anxiety shot through the roof when I heard the news. And it wasn't a sense of, it wasn't necessarily surrounding what happened. It was anxiety of the fallout of what happened. And it's hard to not feel like kind of a walking target or this when being trans becomes this political thing, just your existence, because it's such a big talking point right now, it gets a little anxiety provoking. And right now they're doing investigations. They have identified the shooter. I think it's like this 20-year-old kid named Thomas Cook or something along those lines, and now they're just kind of doing some background research of who he was, who were his parents, why did he do this, who was he affiliated with, if anybody. And throughout this process, I probably shouldn't even be on platforms like Twitter and stuff, but you just see people looking to see if they are LGBTQ or trans or anything of the sort. So it just gets kind of shitty when a whole ass political party looks to kind of point the finger at people that are similar to you. So the heightened emotions definitely just rev the anxiety, and it's hard because they like to put everyone in the same box. So I think because I've experienced so much hate on the internet recently for the past month or so, just every day getting comments due to being trans, whether it's telling me I'm going to kill myself or telling me that they're going to kill me. And that was before all of this happened. So now I'm just kind of anticipating that it's not going to get better from here. So that's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow. But I digress. We move on. So speaking of stress and anxiety, it can be hard to sleep when you're experiencing stress and anxiety. So I found a study for some supplements that might be helpful for sleep. So I thought I would go over this study and then I would dive into the topic. So if you're having a hard time sleeping due to current events, or maybe you just struggle with sleep in general, let's check out a study about melatonin and magnesium for sleep. And that's the combo of those two together. So maybe you take one or the other, but how does it work if you take them both? All right, so what was studied? The effect of supplementing with combination of melatonin and magnesium on sleep quality in participants with poor sleep quality. So the outcomes assessed were overall sleep quality, individual sleep metrics, total time sleep and sleep latency, body composition, energy, calorie intake, mood, physical activity, and resting metabolic rate. So who was studied? 32 participants, ages 35 to 55, 21 women, 11 men with poor sleep quality, as evidenced by Pittsburgh's Sleep Quality Index score of less than 5. So how was it studied? So in this 4-week randomized crossover trial, the participants supplemented with 1.9 milligrams of melatonin plus 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium or placebo 30 minutes before sleep daily. A washout period of 7 days separated the interventions. Overall sleep quality was assessed using the PSQI, and individual sleep metrics were measured using an activity monitor, which was worn continuously to track physical activity also. Dietary intake was monitored using food frequency questionnaire. So what were the results? Compared with the placebo intervention, overall sleep quality improved during the during the melatonin and magnesium intervention. Also, there was a small reduction in total daily energy intake, fat mass, and anger, hostility, as well as a higher amount of energy expended performing physical activity during the melatonin plus magnesium intervention versus the placebo intervention. There was no difference between the interventions for resting metabolic rate. So if you're feeling any anger or hostility, time to take your magnesium and melatonin. So if, maybe whether you're a Democrat or a Republican right now, take your melatonin, take your magnesium, see if we can chill the fuck out a little bit, maybe unite. Maybe we're all just lacking some sleep, right? We'll be a little bit more pleasant with each other if we could all get some more sleep. All right, so anything about this study that you might need to know? So the researchers did not adjust for multiple comparisons, which increases the risk of false positive results. So 5 of the researchers were former employees of the companies that manufactured the melatonin plus magnesium supplement evaluated. However, the study was not funded by that company, so there could possibly be some bias, and there's some situations that increase the risk of false positive. But I will say, from personal experience, both the melatonin plus magnesium situation does help. I currently do that, not because I read this study and wanted to try it, but it's just because I've been doing it because I, have sleep struggles, and I also have struggles with restless legs. So melatonin is what I generally use to take for that. And then, magnesium is what I use for the restless legs. And then the melatonin, just because I need to sleep. So that was an interesting study, and it has helped me personally. So I would suspect that the study is on the right note with being like, hey, yes, this is helpful. So anyways, moving on from sleep, we are going to talk about stress, and in particular, stress eating. So a lot of us are stressed right now. Life is stressful. Who isn't stressed? So if you're someone who struggles with stress eating, then this episode is for you. And if you are human, chances are you have done some sort of stress eating. I have done some stress eating. I think we have all been guilty of it at some point or another. So what exactly is stress eating? So stress eating, it's pretty straightforward. It's something you do when you're feeling stressed. You're feeling like you need some comfort. So for example, nothing tastes or nothing sounds better than comfort food when you're feeling stressed, right? That's why it's called comfort food. And so this is why it's called comfort food. When you're feeling stressed, you tend to crave sweets, those foods that just taste so damn good. It's basically a drug, right? So when you are stress eating, you're generally eating out of stress and not of hunger. So it's not necessarily that you're feeling hungry and that's why you're stressed and that's why you're eating. It's because you just need some way to cope. You need some comfort. You need like a warm hug, which is food. But the problem is we can't always just eat when we're feeling stressed, because this can lead to health issues. And chronic stress in and of itself is not great. So chronic stress eating is also going to cause some issues. So why do we stress eat? Seems also pretty obvious, right? But there is some, physical aspects to it that you might not be aware of. So stress can trigger the release of cortisol, which is a hormone that can increase appetite and cravings for sugary, fatty, or salty foods. And you've all probably heard cortisol being thrown around when it comes to weight gain and stuff like this, or like chronic stress. So cortisol in of itself is not bad. It's just bad when it becomes chronic, right? So cortisol is actually a friend when it comes to stress. It helps us stay alive. It's that fight or flight hormone that we need. So if we're in the wilderness trying to survive, you do need a healthy amount of cortisol. It's just, when we're in everyday life, sometimes we get stuck in situations where our brain thinks that we're running from something. Maybe we're running from a bear. And in fact, we're just sending an email. So modern life, uh, our bodies have not really caught up with modern life. We're still stuck in stone ages, hunter-gatherer ages, and our bodies are trying to keep us alive in those in the olden times. But hey, we'll catch up eventually. Anyways, so cortisol, it's not going to be this thing that like really inherently causes you to gain weight, but it's the response to it that can. As you know, like I said, it can, trigger cravings for sugary, fatty, salty foods, which is mostly ultra processed, highly palatable foods. So emotional distress can lead to eating as a coping mechanism to temporarily soothe negative emotions. The problem is that it only soothes temporarily and can have negative health consequences. So that's the biggest thing you want to keep in mind when it comes to stress and stress eating. The soothing situation is very, very temporary. Like as soon as that food is gone, that stress is going to come right back. So that's something to keep in mind when you're grabbing for that donut or whatever it is you reach for when you're feeling stressed. So let's talk about some of the impacts of stress eating. So obviously short term, there's that immediate gratification. You probably immediately feel better once you're able to you start eating that food. Maybe it's crumble cookie, maybe it's cake, maybe it's ice cream, whatever floats your boat. Personally, I love cookies and I don't keep them around me because, hey, I'm always stressed. That's why there's nothing in my house that I can stress eat, because I am always stressed. And of course, I would reach for something if I could. So instead, I have nothing to reach for, or fruits, vegetables. We'll get to that in a second. But so yeah, there's that immediate gratification. You're going to feel better very shortly, but it is very short-lived. And then after the soothing of those emotions, generally it's followed by shame, guilt, and then maybe some physical discomfort if you went into a complete binge and you're so full and you're like hardly able to move. You have a stomach ache or something along those lines. But mostly it's those feelings of shame and guilt that kind of overpower you. And now not only are you stressed, but now you feel shame and guilt. Therefore, things just got way worse. So that's the short-term consequences, but long-term consequences. So chronic stress eating can lead to weight gain, disrupted eating patterns or disordered eating, and increased risk of health issues from obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart disease. So all the risks of overeating, essentially, because if you are chronically overeating via stress eating, yes, there's chance for weight gain, chance for developing other diseases related to weight gain and obesity. So biggest thing you can do when it comes to stress eating is identify your triggers. So when you're keeping food logs, for example, instead of just logging what you eat, it's also a good idea to log how you're feeling. So that way, maybe you find yourself stress eating. A lot of times when it comes to stress eating, we also like to look the other way and not log our food. So I would just say at least log your food and your mood together, so that you can identify what you eat when you're feeling a certain way. And also log how you're feeling afterwards. So log your feelings before and after when you are logging your food. I wish MyFitnessPal actually had a place to log your mood along with your meals. I feel like that would be exponentially more helpful. Maybe sometime in the future, we'll see what happens, but it'll probably be like a premium version that costs you $8,000 a month, because they tend to just charge you for every extra feature that they come up with that should be helpful. So knowing your triggers, what stresses you out? I mean, I wouldn't say avoid it, but it's definitely going to be something. If you can avoid it, please do. But if you're someone who's high anxiety like me and social situations stress you out, can't always avoid those things. But you can find different ways to cope. And another thing you can do is, before you go and reach for the comfort food, go through that drive-through, go for that pint of ice cream in the freezer or whatever, ask yourself, are you really hungry, or are you just stressed? If food like chicken breast, rice, broccoli, real food doesn't sound appealing to you, but cake or ice cream or cookies or etc. does, or pizza, then chances are you're not truly hungry. You're not physically hungry. You are emotionally and mentally hungry. But what can help with those outside of food? Maybe you need to talk to someone. Maybe you need a hug. What are some ways that you can meet your emotional needs outside of food? So those are some things to think about before just turning right to food. So some strategies to combat stress eating. So obviously, first one being stress management. The less stressed you are, the less likely you are to stress eat. So find other things that help you de-stress outside of food. Listen to music, talk to a friend, meditation, yoga, go for a walk outside, whatever it is, whatever cringy, non-cringy way, or cringy if you prefer, to cope outside of food. Go for that. Maybe it's journaling. I don't know. Whatever floats your boat. But the biggest thing that I always say to change is it is hard sometimes to find better coping mechanisms. And especially in that transition period of, finding other things that work for you, I would say control your environment. Make it harder for you to stress eat by taking highly processed foods out of your house, taking those things that you generally stress eat out of sight, out of mind, and then replace it with things like fruits, vegetables, that sort of thing. I know it doesn't sound fun. You're like, I don't want to eat those things in place of cake and cookies. That's the point. Exactly. Right. So just creating a better environment to push you away from stress eating is going to be key. It goes a long way. Trust me. And even if you are like, that doesn't work for me, I will for sure DoorDash whatever it is I want. There's still a little bit of a barrier there and a little bit more of a consequence. It's going to cost you a good amount of money. So if you're just constantly ordering DoorDash to meet your stress eating needs, you're going to start to see it in your bank account. And that's going to trigger you to say, okay, well, it can trigger two different things. You can say, okay, I really need to work on this. Or it could be like, okay, I give up. I'm just buying it and keeping it in my house. But let's not go for the second option, all right? Let's try to work on things. Get outside of the stress eating cycle. So that being said, if you're stress eating regularly and you're finding it hard to find ways to cope outside of using food for comfort, it might be time to seek help, ask for help. Number one thing I would recommend here would be seeing a therapist, especially if you could see a therapist who, maybe they specialize in things like eating disorders, anxiety, that sort of thing. They can actually help you come up with better ways to cope outside of food. It's not easy, especially if it's something you've been doing your whole life. So essentially, it's like taking your blankie away. I was a kid who had a blanket. I had a comfort blanket, and if I didn't have it with me, I'd be a mess. So taking away food as your comfort blanket, in the same way that it's not easy for a kid when their comfort blanket gets taken away, it's gonna be a struggle. You're gonna want to throw some fits. You're gonna want to go back to your old habits, but it does get better. And the more ways that you find healthier ways of coping, the more you're going to go to those healthier ways versus falling back into the old ways. Because again, remember, when you stress eat, although the feelings of stress go down while you're eating, it gets exponentially worse because then you got the stress and the shame and the guilt. All right. So biggest thing to remember there, it does not help. It only makes it worse. Okay. So outside of a therapist, I would say, if you have some friends you could talk to, family members, or a support group, even if it's just like a support group on Reddit or a Facebook group, those are all ways that are going to help you find better ways to cope, or even seek support when you're in a moment. You can even post something or send someone a text or a message being like, hey, I really feel like stress eating right now. Can you talk to me for 5 minutes, etc. And even if no one's available, just sending out that message can create a pause and actually help you become more aware of what you're about to do. Because I feel like sometimes we're not even aware of what we're doing. We just kind of go straight into whatever is going to make us feel feel better the fastest. So that's about all when it comes to stress eating. And, it's just one of those things of life that can be a really hard habit to break, especially when we're living in such stressful times. So just think about, this week, what are some things that you enjoy or help you de-stress outside of food? I know for me personally, I like to zone out and watch some trashy reality TV. I'm not proud of that, but it's just what works for me. Or I like to watch old comfort shows. And for me, that one is, for whatever reason, ER. So this was the show before Grey's Anatomy. For anyone who's young and has no idea what ER was or is, that's a comfort show of mine. Another one is oddly Roseanne. So, eventually you find those things that kind of help take your mind off things, and makes it a little easier not to just run to food. But also, I think a friend or partner can also be a good help, not only for accountability, but for someone to just talk to about things. Talking is one of the most helpful things. So if you're struggling alone, find someone to talk to about it. So anyways, let's move on. So I'm going to wrap up this podcast. And if you have any other ways that you like to cope versus stress eating, leave them down in the comments. I would love to hear how you cope outside of food, or any of your struggles that comes with stress eating and food. So there is an ability now to comment on Spotify. So whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening to this on Spotify, leave me a comment. I love that I can say that now, and I don't have to be like, leave me a rating, and it's just okay, whatever. But yeah, comments, very welcome, very much appreciated. And if you have any topic suggestions, also let me know. But I hope everyone is hanging in there. I know there's a lot going on in the world, and by the time you're listening to this, there's probably going to be some new developments. But let's just buckle in and ride through November the best we can, and of course turn to each other for support, and obviously not via violence. All right guys, thanks so much for listening. Peace out. I will talk to you next time.